That show is too good.
That's good. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of Go Talk Markets presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. Once again, joining me on the show is my guy, Martin Soaries of the Basketball Society. And today we are talking all things WNBA basketball. The Las Vegas Aces are 100% in championship form so far through the first 4 games of the season. Aaliyah Boston and Zia Cook have been hooping for their respective teams. But Washington Mystics, although 2-2, have come out to a pretty strong start. All that and so much more next on Go Talk with Marcus.
Give them a shot to do what?
Martin, my man, how you doing today?
Always good to be here. Good to see you, man. Good to be here another day.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to be here on the show with you. There's so much to talk about, man. And it's crazy because the season's only been live for what would today marks 2 full weeks of the season. But like so much has happened. I was trying to put the show together, and honestly, there's still some things that I left out. That's just how solid the season has been. But let's start off by talking about the defending champion Las Vegas Aces, who have started out the season so far at a strong 4-0, which, you know me as an Aces fan, I love everything about that. What has been the most impressive thing for you about the Aces at this so far this season?
The most impressive thing through these first 4 games has to be Jackie Young, bro. Jackie Young is an MVP candidate right now. And I'll say this, last season, even though it was A'ja Wilson's to lose, and I easily felt like it was hers, as we were going through the season and I was watching the Aces, I should have been more public about the fact that I thought Kelsey Plum should have been an MVP candidate. When I watched the Aces last season and I watched how dynamic they were and how hard they were to beat, it was Kelsey Plum at the point of attack. And she's still frying, but now it's Jackie Young. She's an MVP candidate. And when you have your former MVP, A'ja Wilson from last season, just out there, you got Candace Parker now out there. Jackie Young is playing MVP basketball. She's looking like the best player on the team. And that's when you're looking at a really scary, I mean, that's the whole point of having a quote unquote super team, is that different players can look like your best player in different games. And I think the most impressive thing early on is the fact that Jackie Young, while she had the potential to be that, we've been watching her develop and grow each season, but she's looking like their best player and an MVP candidate. So that's one of the most impressive things. And then obviously, you know, the Aces led the league in scoring last year at 90 points a game. They're off to the running. I mean, they've scored no less than 93 points so far, and I believe they've given up no more than like 85. So it's looking easy for them. Everyone is flourishing, and Jackie Young, of their 5 legitimate star talents, Jackie Young so far is looking like the best player, and that just makes things even scarier for them.
I 100% agree. It's been the Jackie Young show so far through the first couple games of the season, and I'm not complaining, right? Like you mentioned, like as a fan, of course, I have very little things to complain about when the team's undefeated. But when you look at what Jackie Young has done so far, she's averaging 23 points per game. She's shooting 62% from the field, 57% from 3. She's hitting 73% of her free throws. Like, she is playing really, 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 really good basketball. And I 100% agree. Like, of all the names on this roster you think would be in the conversation for MVP, Jackie Young's name, I don't think, is one of those names you thought. And that's no shot at Jackie Young because she's an incredible talent. But this roster is stacked from top to bottom. You have the reigning MVP, the 2-time MVP at that, and A'ja Wilson. Obviously, you have Kelsey Plum, who I agree. You've got Chelsea Gray, who really came into her own and put her stamp on her role and how important she is to this team in that playoff run last season, and especially in the finals. You have Candace Parker. Like, Jackie Young has been balling. But the person for me, though, that's been the most impressive, aside from Jackie Young, is Chelsea Gray, like I mentioned. She's averaging 14 points, shooting 55% from the field, 54% from 3. She's yet to miss a free throw this season, and she's averaging 8 assists. Like, she has been the floor general for this team, much as we expected her to be, but now like she's able to get everyone involved. And that's what you have to love about Chelsea Gray is she gets everybody involved. She gets Kelsey Plum involved. She gets Asia involved. She gets Jackie Young involved. She gets Alicia Clark involved. This team through 4 games hasn't just looked like the best team in the league. Like they've looked like they've picked up right where they left off as WNBA champions just last season, which is crazy to think about, right? Because when you look at a team that had as much turnover as they have, as far as, you know, letting go of or trading Dearica Hamby to the Sparks and all that kind of went into that. When you think about bringing in someone as talented and as marquee and as a box office as Candace Parker is, even at this stage in her career, like all those things, we brought in obviously Alicia Clark, all these moving parts, and still the Aces look like they haven't skipped a beat. The continuity there has been incredible. And like you mentioned, they've yet to score less than like 100 points a game this season, which is on pace to be, they're on pace to have the greatest offense in the history of the league is what they're on pace for. And that's absolutely incredible when you think about the fact that, too, they're also on pace to have one of the best defenses the league has ever seen. And it's just amazing to see what the Aces have done, obviously as a fan, but just in terms of basketball. Like, it's been incredible what the Aces have done so far through the first 4 games of the season.
Asia Wilson, I just saw the quote from her on Paul George's podcast. Did you see she mentioned, I like that she's talking like this.
Yeah.
She said she needs her name to be up there with the all-time greats. And I mean, based on her resume, how can you argue against that? Yeah. But the crazy thing is that she's not close to done yet. I mean, who knows what this group in Las Vegas is getting ready to do, what their legacy will ultimately be, because we're still early in it. And, you know, I've said it before, like, there's only so many teams in the WNBA. There's only so much to dominate. So, I mean, they are head and shoulders just better and above everyone else right now. And Asia and the Aces they're creating an historic legacy right now, right before our eyes. It's happening. They could go down as one of the best teams of all time, if not the best team.
It's been a long time since you've seen a team in the WNBA go back-to-back as far as championships are concerned. The Aces are definitely on track to change that so far this season. Let's switch gears. Let's move on and talk about 2 of the 4 freshies that are in the WNBA right now. Let's talk about Aaliyah Boston for Indiana. Let's talk about Zia Cook in LA. Obviously, earlier today, Aaliyah Boston was named the Rookie of the Month for what she's done so far in Indiana. Zia Cook has also been cooking, no pun intended, in her own right in LA. Who have you been more impressed with? I know comparison is the theft of joy, but who have you been more impressed with so far, Boston or Cook?
From what I've seen, honestly, I think, I mean, I'm super impressed with both, but I'm really impressed with Zia. I just think as a guard, as a small guard in the WNBA, where they're just bigger. And like I talked to you about last time I was on, the WNBA is known for their bigs. They promote their bigs. It's the history of great bigs. And they're just known for their talented size, and just the fact when you get to the league, the girls get bigger and stronger. And Zia's been taking her licks. She took one from Asia Wilson herself, another South Carolina alumni, and she's taking her licks. But she, you know, I think I see her out there just being aggressive, figuring things out. Also, not that Indiana is some great team yet. But I also think that where the Sparks are is a little tougher for someone to figure themselves out again, especially as a guard, and especially as a guard that it's not like they're just giving Zia the ball and playing through her. She's not the number 1 pick. She's not the number 1 option on that team. And yet I'm still seeing highlights and feedback and notes and people talking about Zia, the way I see her just being aggressive out there on the floor. She's clearly being proactive in getting hers, and what she's getting minutes from Kurt Miller, which also means that she's doing the little things and the right things in practice, which says a lot. So I don't know who I'm more impressed by. I'm super impressed by Aaliyah, but I think just being with the Sparks where they need a spark, they're kind of, you know, they're bouncing back from losing you know, different people over the years. They're still trying to find kind of a new identity for that franchise, I think. And I think Zia is doing a nice job just carving out a place for herself so far.
She absolutely is. Not. I agree with you. I do think Zia Cook has been more impressive. That's kind of an ironic thing to say when you consider Aaliyah Boston was the number 1 overall pick. But Aaliyah Boston's been playing great basketball. Don't get me wrong. She's averaging, I think, 16 points and she's averaging 6 boards a game. And what she's done so far through 3 games is something that, as her teammate Nalissa Smith has mentioned, is a very difficult thing to do. It's very difficult to impact the game the way that she has at such an early point in her career. But Zia Cook right now, she's averaging like 8 points a game. But if you look at her per 100 possession stats, she's averaging 23 points on 42% shooting from the field and 40% from 3. She's playing really good basketball. Like, and she's doing, like you mentioned, all the little things that when you look at some of the things that, and I don't know why this comparison is the one that speaks out to me the most, but when I look at what Zia Cook is doing right now for the Sparks, it reminds me a lot of what DeJounte Carrington was doing for the Sun, and still does for the Sun, but a little bit, especially last season. Like, DeJounte Carrington is so important for that Sun team. And I tweeted this the other day, like, she is the offensive spark for that team. She is the defensive spark for that team. Like, she is the energy off the bench. And Zia Cook has been that in a way so far for the LA Sparks. And players like that always seem to find their minutes, always seem to find their moments to shine, and always seem to find their groove in a Kurt Miller coached organization. And that's what Zia Cook has done. Like, she has been the spark for the Sparks, like you mentioned, no pun intended, off the bench. And she has done so in the very limited minutes that she has. Like, she's not having a lot of minutes, but when she gets the ball in her hands and when she's able to step foot on the floor, she's playing good basketball. She's only averaging 18 minutes a game, but she's still playing and still making the most out of that 18. She did have her moment with A'ja Wilson that Don Staley didn't like all that much, but she's still playing really good basketball. And one of the things that we talked about after the draft was which player did we think was going to be the best fit. And I think you and I were both on the same page, I remember correctly, about Zia Cook being a beautiful fit for this Sparks team, not just because of who they have on the roster, but because of who Kurt Miller is as a basketball coach. And so far through what I believe they've played 4 or 5 games, so far, she's proven that she is that perfect fit for them and for what they've been able to do. They only have 1 win on the season. It's been unfortunate. They've had some injuries, but Zia Cook has been balling out in the games that they've played.
Yeah, she's gonna keep figuring things out. She's too talented of a player. If you know about Zia Cook from high school, you didn't see that same Zia Cook in college, and I talked about that on my podcast at one point. I mean, you're almost never the same exact player you were in high school. In college, there's always a learning curve, a transition. There's always an evolution or a regression, but there's always adjustments you have to make. But still, if high school will sometimes just give you a reference of like how talented a player is. Sometimes you just see their full talent on display. And the kind of things I saw Zia Cook doing in high school let me know that that girl is prepared for whatever, as long as she has the right kind of confidence instilled in her. If you let her go, she will show you some stuff. She's going to keep figuring things out.
Yeah, and again, let's not take anything away from Aaliyah Boston, because Aaliyah Boston has been playing good, like we mentioned. She got 16 points. She's averaging 16 points a game, 6 boards. She was the rookie of the month. She did play really good in the 1 win that the Fever have so far this season. That was a big win for them too, just as far as history is concerned. I think they were on pace to have like the longest losing streak in the history of the league, and they snapped it with that win there. So that was a really big one. But we were talking before the show about how crucial she played, or how big a role she played in that game they played against the Liberty just the other day, even though it was in a losing effort, and how Aaliyah Boston stepped up when they really needed her to, hitting that big 3 down the stretch to kind of keep the game close. When I look at Aaliyah Boston, and we talked about this again the last time we were on the show after the draft, about how like Aaliyah Boston's going to be the next big name for the Fever as far as marketing. And we see that from a social media standpoint because of how much the Fever have pushed them, but just on the floor. Like, she's young, but all of these players around her, they seem to gravitate towards that energy. They seem to gravitate toward that leadership, and they seem to they all want her to be successful, and they all want to feed off her. Like I mentioned earlier, Nalissa Smith has had very high praise for Aaliyah Boston so far through the first 4 games of the series about how she's been able to adjust and have her game from South Carolina translate to her game here in Indiana. I have been super impressed with what Aaliyah Boston has done as a number 1 overall pick in not the best situation, being able to impact the game the way that she has so far this season.
Super impressed, not surprised one bit. Yeah. She's a big body that knows how to use her body and knows when to be graceful, when to be physical. She's a high-level screener. She has soft hands, great touch around the rim, great feel for the game. I mean, when you look at what's happening on the NBA side right now, we're watching a big dominate the game. We're having people say like he's just too we just can't stop him. He's too big, he's too skilled, he's too coordinated, and we can't stop him. And like I've said, the WNBA has a long, rich history of great bigs. Aaliyah Boston is going on that list very soon, if not right away, because she has all the things, she has all the intangibles, and winning is contagious. When you're part of a winning culture like she was at South Carolina, and you come to you're used to winning. Doesn't mean you're going to win right away, but you do the things that you had to do when you were part of a winning program. And so any of those players on Indiana that haven't been used to winning, or the franchise isn't used to winning, whatever, just her presence brings in more of a winning culture and mentality. And that's going to matter on and off the floor.
100%. Speaking about a team that has a winning mentality, I talked about this the last time. I think the last WNBA show was about a week and a half ago. The Washington Mystics. I know they're 2-2. They've played good ball throughout the course of their 4 games, just having some tough losses in there. The Washington Mystics have been exactly as advertised and exactly as expected, at least for me. Right? When you look at the roster construction, when you have Elena Delle Donne, who's a former MVP in this league, when you have Natasha Cloud, who led the league in assists last season, when you have Shakira Austin, who I think is going to have an amazing year too, and she's already off to a good start so far. Like, this is a really good basketball team. They've drawn some tough matchups so far. They lost back-to-back games. It was a tough matchup for them. But when you look at what the Mystics are doing, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Elena Delle Donne. It might have been Natasha Cloud. One of those two ladies mentioned that like they recognize what's happening in New York. They recognize that Jonquel Jones and Breonna Stewart have gone out there. They recognize how great of a talent that Sabrina Ionescu is and what that could potentially be as a big three and as a unit overall. But they were also like, let's not sleep on what we have going on down here in DC. When you look at the Mystics, do you think the Mystics so far, based on what we've seen so far, are a legit threat, not just to the Liberty, but to the league as it pertains to making it back to and potentially winning a championship this season?
Yeah, I do. They have championship history. They've won a title, so they know what it's like. They have Elena Delle Donne, and it seems like they have a really motivated Elena Delle Donne. Mm-hmm. She came out recently saying something about the foul calls, how she doesn't think she's getting the same calls as other people. So I think they're getting a really motivated Elena Delle Donne. And anytime I think it was Natasha Cloud who pointed out the thing about the super teams, and she actually called them superhero teams, which I thought was hilarious. But you see what's going on in the league. You know, everyone's talking about Aces and Liberty, and that's a foregone conclusion. That's the finals. Those are the 2 best teams. Hard not to think that way. But when you have players like Natasha Cloud, Elena Delle Donne, championship pride, competitive pride. Don't forget Brittney Sykes, too. That's one of my favorite players in the league, bro. She does everything. I love Brittney Sykes. Everything. She does everything so well on both sides of the floor. Yeah. Washington they're one of the teams that has, starting with Elena Delle Donne, because you need a unicorn. Look, the 2 top teams in the league have Asia Wilson, Breonna Stewart. Elena Delle Donne is right in that mix with them in terms of being a unicorn. Like she's one of them. So you kind of need one. You need a monster to beat a monster. So the Mystics have their unicorn, their monster. They've got other pieces. They've got weapons, and they have championship culture. So I mean, they beat up on the Liberty in the season opener, and I don't know if I made my bold prediction for the season. I picked the Liberty to win it all. I thought about it. The season opener is about to start. I'm like, man, I know the Aces are probably going to repeat. I know that's the favorite, but I'm thinking about it. I'm just like, man, I do really feel like if the Liberty can put it all together, they'll win it all. I know if at their best, I know they could beat the Aces in a series. They can be, and they're talented enough, but they just got to put it together. So I'm kind of just banking on them putting it together. I think they're going to become their ultimate selves, and I look forward to seeing them at their best. I think at their best, they're going to win it all. But Washington beat up on the Liberty in that season opener and made a real statement, especially on the defensive end. They have their identity. They have a sound and firm identity on the defensive end. They may not be scoring a whole lot, but they can defend, and they can score when they need to. So that's going to be the biggest thing for Washington. But they have what they need to be a thorn in the side of anybody.
Yeah. And look, let's talk about Elena Delle Donne a little bit more. She's averaging 21 points per game. She's shooting 54% from the field, which right now is on pace to be a career high for her. She's averaging 58% from 3, which is on pace to be second most in her career since 2021. And in 2021, she only played 3 games. So in a full season, she's on pace to have her greatest shooting season she's had all season. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I thought that Elena Delle Donne could be in a dark horse for MVP this season because, as you mentioned, she's got a lot to prove. And I think she's going to prove it. Now, that's not to say that she has a lot to prove because she's had some down years. She has a lot to prove because she doesn't want people to forget about who the Washington Mystics are, right? They won the championship in 2019. She got hurt in 2021, so they didn't make the playoffs. And then 2022, they got bounced out of the playoffs after the first round, I believe it was. But like she and the entire roster are out to prove that the Mystics are still a team to be reckoned with. And it was no disrespect or no shade in Natasha Cloud's comments about the Liberty and the Super Tens. But what they were saying is, let's not forget who we're talking about here. Like, we're talking about a team that has that culture, that has that experience, that has been to a championship, that is led by a player who has won MVP, and we've all been to the mountaintop and we want to get back. But I think the X factor in all of this, and I mentioned it once and I'll say it again, it's Shakira Austin. Like, I thought the drafting of Shakira Austin last season was perfect. This was a perfect scenario for them, for the Mystics and for Austin, because she gets to learn behind one of the best to ever do it in Elena Delle Donne. And so far, she's been having a great season. She's averaging 14 points per game. She's shooting 58% from the field, and she's averaging 8 boards. She's playing fantastic basketball so far through the first 4 games of the season. And the better she gets and the more consistent she remains, that takes less stress off of Elena Delle Donne. They had a game the other day where they both combined for like 70 some odd points or something like that. And it was a really strong win. She played really well in that season opener that you were mentioning, where they blew out the Liberty, blew them out of the water. Like, these two players specifically, I think, are going to be the key. Of course, Natasha Cloud is going to continue to be the facilitator. You've got all this other amazing talent around them, but these two ladies in the front court are going to be the key. And as long as Elena Delle Donne is playing MVP caliber basketball, which is what she's been doing so far, and as long as Shakira Austin is continuing to take that second jump in this sophomore season, which she has done so far, the Mystics are going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Mystics get past the Liberty in the finals. Like, the Liberty are a better team on paper, but the Mystics have the experience and they have the chemistry already established. And I think that's what we saw in that first game of the series, was you guys still have some kinks to work out and we're ready to hit the ground running. And the Mystics so far, even though they're 2-2, they've hit the ground running.
Right. And we're talented too. It's like, hey, we've got talent too. It's not just, we're not just, chemistry and we love each other and we believe in each other. They've got elite talent too.
Yeah. So let's talk about the New York Liberty. Let's talk about Breanna Stewart, who, after that slacking on the road in in game 1, they've routed off 4 straight, and they're sitting 4-1. Breanna Stewart gave us 45 points the other day, and you and I had an exchange on Instagram about just how mind-blowing and how impressive that really was. We just got notice earlier today that Marina Johannes is back from her international duties, which is huge. You and I talked about that a bit. When you look at the New York Liberty, I know obviously you have championship expectations and they're going to get there. But when you look at this unit, what do you think is the key for them moving forward to continue the success and reach that championship ceiling that I think a lot of people, including us, are expecting for them?
From what I've seen, I think the biggest thing, and I've listened to a few people who cover the Liberty, who cover them closely, directly, and know what they're talking about. And I hear it being talked about. And I've thought about this. Anytime you've got a big 3 or a super team, there's always 1 or 2 players where you're like, yo, they got to make sure. Like when Bosch went to Miami, I'm like, yo, I know he's taking a back seat, but he's still got to be productive. He's still got to be him. They're going to need him to be big in big spots, and they did. And he was. And that it's just something I always think about. Jonquel Jones is the biggest piece to me. I feel like if they establish Jonquel Jones, you almost forget how good she is. Like, you almost forget how good she is. I mean, she's a dominant inside player.
MVP a couple years ago.
Oh, a former MVP. I mean, she can knock down the 3. She's got a beautiful 3-point stroke. I mean, the amount of things she can do for you, she adds so much versatility to what they can do offensively. And when I watch them, I'm like, man, if they can get Jonquel established early in the pick and roll game, in the pick and pop game, even just give her some post up touches, but just make sure that she's involved and getting her touches and being in rhythm of the game. I think that's what's going to make them the most dangerous. Just making sure that Jonquel Jones is in rhythm, because Stewie is going to get Sabrina's touching up. She's going to get her touches. Stewie's going to get her shots. They're going to get their looks and touches. Vandersloot is controlling the ball. She's doing a good job running the show. She's not shooting too well yet, but she will when it's time. She's just that kind of player. It's fine. But Jonquel Jones, I think, is going to be the key. Maureen Johannes, to me, is another key, because she is what I can't wait to see how they look with her. She's going to make them extra dynamic. She gives them something that I don't think any other team in the league has a player like Maureen Johannes, especially coming off the bench. I just don't. And so you look at all of what they have already. You add a dynamic player like that. Laney's doing a nice job defending and just, filling in, playing her role, but she can give you offense at any time too. I really feel like the biggest thing for me, if Jonquel Jones is established and in rhythm, and I think she needs to have some big games here in the season too, where they really go through her and make sure she feels established as one of the offensive anchors of the team. That's what's going to put the Liberty on pace to being the championship team that I predicted that they'll be.
I 100% agree. I mean, Brianna Stewart right now, she's been amazing. She's averaging almost 26 points per game. I believe Sabrina Ionescu is averaging like 16 on the dot. Jonquel Jones is only averaging 9 points if you round up. And it's only been 5 games, and there's no need to panic. We've got a long season ahead of us. But I 100% agree with you. Like, we got to get Jonquel Jones established. When you look across the league and you look at really the 3 teams that I think are clearly at the top, they've got 2 ladies up front that are going to get theirs. We've talked about Della Dunn and Shakira Austin. Obviously, there's Candace Parker and Asia Wilson in Las Vegas. Brianna Stewart and Jonquel Jones, they got to get theirs, and they got to get theirs together at the same time. Like, that's going to be what it's going to come down to. When it comes down to a Liberty Mystics matchup in the playoff, that's going to be what it comes down to. When it comes down to a potential Aces Liberty matchup in the finals, that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to that front court. We've kind of beat this idea throughout the course of the show, the importance of bigs in the WNBA, not just now, but in history. Like, the bigs are important. And Jonquel Jones was the focal point in Connecticut, and that is what led to their success under Curt Miller. Now she's not the focal point, but she should still be right there behind Brianna Stewart. And that's no shot at Sabrina Ionescu, because I think Sabrina Ionescu is amazing. I see there was a couple people that kind of were thinking like she shouldn't be taking as many shots as she's been taking so far. And I'm inclined to agree, but at the same time, I think that there is a way that you can make these puzzle pieces fit without anyone having to sacrifice the kind of player that they are, right? And I think that there's a way to make it work, and all it takes is just that time. It just takes time for them to figure out how they can make this work so that everybody, so that Jonquel Jones can still be Jonquel Jones, so that Brianna Stewart can still be Brianna Stewart, so that Sabrina Ionescu can still be Sabrina Ionescu, and then everyone else can kind of fall in place where they fit. This is a roster that's super talented from top to bottom. First of all, the fans love Honshu, which is amazing. Like, she's become the fan favorite. There's been 2 or 3 games so far this season when they've been chanting her name for her to come in the game, and they love her. And she's amazing in her own right as well. But specifically, when you look at this big 3, that is always a difficult dynamic to try to figure out, is making sure that all 3 of those players, like you mentioned, the Bosh, Wade, LeBron thing, like making sure that, like LeBron's going to be LeBron and D-Wade's going to be D-Wade, but let's not forget who Chris Bosh is and how important he is to a piece to this puzzle. I think the Liberty have to kind of have that same thing. And I think as the season progresses and as we start to settle into the season, I think we'll start to see that establishment, and we'll start to see more of those Jonquel Jones vintage games where we're looking at those 25 and 10s, those 27 and 13s, the things that she was doing in Connecticut. But once those puzzle pieces mesh and come together, there's no doubt in my mind that the Liberty can't reach that championship ceiling that I think a lot of us kind of, as you mentioned, I've already anticipated that Liberty Aces matchup. It's going to come. It's going to take some time.
Yeah, I mean, if they can put it together this season, I think it can get there. And I think they can. I think Sandy Brondello is the right coach for the job. I think she's doing already a good job, and she's only going to get better. I really feel like they're only going to get better. They're a great shooting team. I think their shooting and their passing game is where they can really kill people. We're not even seeing the full potential. I mean, it goes without saying, but we haven't even seen the full potential of their offense yet. We've seen Stewie go into, God Stewie mode and, MVP, best player in the league potentially mode, right? We've seen her do that already. We know what Sabrina can do. She could go out for 6 threes. She can have a big game, right? We know individually what these players can do. But I think we have yet to. I mean, this is a team that I think can average 100 points a game. I think with the right rhythm, with everybody healthy and in rhythm and really humming, they can. I mean, the Aces average 90 points, so that you have to be able to get to 90 right now. The last couple years, the Aces have averaged 90 points a game.
Yep.
That's the mark right now, and the Liberty are doing that. They've done that. They haven't scored less than 83, I believe, so far this season. The Liberty didn't even average 80 points. They didn't even hit 80 points. I think it was 78 or 79 last year. They're already scoring above 80 with ease. I think a few of their games they've hit 90. So we know what their offensive firepower is capable of. Even still getting 90 points and averaging, we still have not seen them at their full potential yet. I hope we can see it this season.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get there to that point. There is one story across the WNBA that permeated through the WNBA, not just with the players and the coaches, but with the fans, and that is the story of Brittney Griner and what she had to deal with overseas and now coming back. The Mercury right now are not in the best position. They are 1-2, I believe, and there's been a lot of different things I think that you can attribute to that. But if we focus on Brittney Griner for just a second, how important, and we know how important Brittney Griner is, of course, to this basketball team. But with Brittney Griner back, can the Mercury get back to being one of the best teams in the league and get back to being the team that could stand in the way of the Aces as it pertains to making it back to and winning a championship in the West?
I would argue that, and I think this is pretty obvious. I think anyone who knows the Phoenix Mercury knows this to be somewhat true. It has just as much to do with Diana Taurasi as it does Brittney Griner. I was watching a Phoenix game recently. I was watching Diana out there moving and still just spacing and shooting and just still doing what she knows how to do. We talked about this with Aaliyah Boston in Indiana. I just think, with some of these franchises and their core identities, it's not to say Diana's holding them hostage or anything, but I don't think Phoenix is going to really move on and evolve into their next era until Diana kind of goes out. Now, they can have another elite guard in there. I know Skylar Diggins is still away from the team. They could definitely use her back. They could bring in they could have another elite guard take the reins of the team, let Diana show her the ropes. Like, again, I don't think Diana's keeping them from bringing in another face of the franchise or anything. I just think that I know that Diana has been the face of that franchise. And when they were at their best, when they were able to still compete for titles, it was the duo. It's Diana and BG being their elite selves. BG just came back from not playing for God knows how long. And I can't believe how good she was looking already right away. Because her game was really getting to a really crazy, like Brittney Griner, and I've been watching her forever. I mean, but like her game was starting. I mean, her jumper, her face-up game, like she was starting to become really unstoppable offensively, because people would just think of her as like, she can dunk every once in a while, and she blocks shots. Like, her offensive repertoire really started to evolve over the last few years. It was really nice to see. But especially in this state, BG is not going to carry them to, it can't just be all on her, especially now. Even a few years ago, you couldn't put that all on her. You definitely can't do it now. So I think, unfortunately or not, this season is kind of just like a welcome back BG for Phoenix. You may not have great expectations for them right now because your two cornerstones, your two still current pillars of the franchise, one just came back from Russia. She's been locked up. You can't expect her to be ready to lead a team. And the other is, clearly past her prime, still effective, but Diana is not going to carry the team either. So they need a more collective effort to galvanize and come together for them to, make their way back. But it may not happen until post Diana at this point.
That's a fair point. And when you look at BG, because like you mentioned, to not be here, and not just be here like out with injury, but to not be in the country for a year and not be playing basketball and to go through what she's gone through and to come back in so immediately through 3 games of the season, I think is how many they've played, be on pace for a career season in multiple different aspects is amazing, right? She's averaging 21 points per game. Her career high is like 22 if you round up, going back to 2017. She's shooting 74% from the field, which is far and away a career high for her. And she's averaging almost 4 blocks a game. I don't know if that'll hold, but if you look back to the 2015 season, she averaged 4 blocks a game. So that can definitely hold for her. That 3.7 can absolutely hold. She is on pace to having a career season, and considering all that she's gone through, to just come back and seamlessly get back into that best in the league conversation, up there with Asia, up there with Della Dawn, up there with Breanna Stewart, which is right where she was before the unfortunate events happened with her, is amazing. I do agree with you, though. I do think that there needs to be something done in Phoenix, because as talented as BG is and as talented as Diana Taurasi still is at this point in their careers, it's not enough at this point when you look at what's happening across the league, but specifically when you look at what's happening in Las Vegas. It's just not going to be enough to get past Vegas. And I would argue that even if Skylar Diggins-Smith was still there, and I love Skylar Diggins-Smith, and she's amazing, even the 3 of them just still wouldn't be enough, not right now. And it's not because of anything that Phoenix is doing. Yeah. It has everything to do with what the Aces have done from the draft and from free agency to further separate themselves and to do what very few teams in the history of sports have done, and that is capitalize on as many championship opportunities as possible while your cornerstone player is in their prime. Like, the Aces and Mark Davis are fully invested in capitalizing on the championship window for as long as A'ja Wilson is in her prime and healthy and in Vegas. Will there ever be a scenario where Wilson plays herself out of Vegas? No. The Aces will pay whatever it takes to keep A'ja Wilson there, because arguably right now, so far, through her very short career at 26 years old, she's already the greatest player to ever step foot on the court for the franchise. Yeah. And she's still got a long way to go before her cement is dry, as people would say, right, as it pertains to her legacy. And they've done everything they can to extend that championship window. The Mercury are a phenomenal organization. They're a well-coached basketball team, and they have talented players. But I think we'll be looking at the Mercury this season, of course, as a playoff team. I don't know if there'll be a championship contender yet, but I think next season we're going to have to see what that route looks like. Because like you said, there's a chance they might not really be able to move on until Diana Taurasi moves on. And it's nothing against Diana Taurasi. She's an amazing player. Her jersey is going up in the rafters the second she decides to hang it up. And she's phenomenal as well. But there needs to be an evolution of the identity of this basketball team. And I don't really know. I agree with you. I don't know if that evolution can happen as long as Diana's there, because Diana has her own identity and she has her own way of playing the game, and her identity has been the identity of this basketball team for so long. It would be tough to try to change the identity of this basketball team while she's still there, which is the case for all sports teams all the time. When you have your cornerstone player and you've got your face of the franchise and you've got a person like Diana Taurasi and that brings to the table what she has brought to the table for this organization, it's hard to kind of figure out a way to alter the identity of the team while they're still there, because them still being there has been successful for them so far. And they're going to want to lean into that, but there's going to come a point in time where they're going to have to move on from it. But the story, like you said, is really just BG's back, and she's been playing great ball. And the Mercury are going to be a playoff team this season for sure. I would be shocked if they missed the playoffs. I think they're just too talented to miss the playoffs, even if they're not going to be vying for a championship. We'll have to look and see over the next year or so what their future holds as far as changing that identity so that they can get back to that perennial championship contention that we were used to them being a couple years ago. It hasn't been that long since they've been in that conversation.
Yeah, and I'll say this though. Brittney Griner is off to a really good start. Mm-hmm. She's only gonna get into better shape, better condition, get back to who she was, getting the feel for the ball and the floor and her wind and all that. who knows? Maybe not just a motivated Brittney Griner, not just a grateful Brittney Griner who hasn't played basketball in so long. You know, maybe she'll turn into this like super monster, super team killer. And maybe she'll have this mentality like, man, I was just in a Russian prison. I don't care nothing about no Candace Parker, Asia, but I'll take all of y'all. They just exchanged me for one of these Russian criminals, bro. I was in there by myself all this time. Like, I ain't scared of no Vegas. Like, I don't care about that. What's the LeBron joint?
Zero Dark 30.
No. The meme, the LeBron joint, where he's like, man, Cavs in 6.
Oh, yeah.
What's the joint? He's like, something, this, no.
Yeah.
Brittney Griner ain't worried. She might turn into like a super soldier or something and be like, man, this basketball thing is just, because combined with the gratitude of getting to play again, she may find a new mean streak. Like, man, I was in my cell by myself all the year. I didn't know if I was gonna get home. This is just bad. I'm about to go out here and get 25 and 20 and just bully y'all girls. Who knows? Maybe.
And she's more than capable of getting 25 and 20. And she's more than capable of doing it. That would be. I don't want to write the Mercury off. I don't want it to sound like I am.
Yeah, it's like you can't. It's like you probably shouldn't, right? You know, I mean, you still have there 2 all-time great players. No matter all of what we said, I mean, there's still 2 all-time great players. Can't count them out. Probably will be a playoff team. Yeah. And if they're in there and you have to play Diana Taurasi and Brittney Griner in a playoff game, anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen. Before we get into players of the week, there is one thing that I do want to talk about, and I apologize for springing this on you because I don't like doing that. But I was just looking at the standings. There are a couple teams that either lost some key pieces or kind of didn't really have a clear game plan going forward into the season, it seemed. And they've been doing a lot better than I think anybody anticipated. The Connecticut Sun are 5-1. And they lost Jonquel Jones in free agency to the New York Liberty. The Dallas Wings are 3-1, and they're a super young basketball team with a lot of different things to figure out. And the Chicago Sky, who have lost Vandersloot and they've lost Parker, they're 3-3. What is this? Are you surprised at all that these 3 teams specifically have still been able to find some moniker of success this season, despite losing certain players and not really seeming like there was a road or a path for them heading into the season?
Honestly, not really, because in each of those cases, I feel like I see things that you still have so much to work with. Connecticut has Alyssa Thomas. I mean, she is like, you talk about do everything. I mean, she is the WNBA Draymond Green, but she scores. She scores. Like, it's crazy. But you're having her as a centerpiece, and you have other good players in Connecticut. Like, these teams still have good players. Chicago, they're 3-3. It's not like they're dominating, but Kalia Copper is ready to. She can be an alpha type player, like so, and she's a dog. Like she's gonna give people problems as the primary option. So that didn't surprise me. Dallas, we know about Arike. We talked about Dallas even after the draft, how they picked up some nice pieces. I know they've dropped a good amount of those people. They don't have all the same people. I still think Maddie Siegrist can put things together and be an asset for them. I know she's not doing much so far, but I still think she could end up being a weapon for them. Not to jump ahead because but my MVP is right on Dallas. Satu Sabally. I think she's changing the game for them because her alongside Arike, what she brings with her versatility at 6'4", lefty, shoots it, making plays out of the pick and roll. That's why she's my MVP, and that's why I see Dallas doing so well. Plus, they have good coaching. So you're getting more talent in the league, a lot, better players at different positions, more versatility. So I really wasn't that surprised.
And Satu's having a career season so far. She's pretty much doubled almost her averages from last season. She's shooting 22 points a game. She's been amazing. Like watching, and we talked about a little bit beforehand to show just some of the games we've been able to pick up on. I've watched, I think, every single Dallas Wings game except for one, I think. And I think the one game I missed was the loss. Watching what Satu has been able to do, and a lot of it has had to do with injury. She has dealt with some injury over the course of her short career to this point. But, like, she is – what we're seeing from her this season has only reconfirmed what we knew about her when she was drafted in 2020, which is when she's available, she is 100% the second option on this basketball team. And she's one of those second options in the league that on any given night can lead the team.
Right.
And she's done that. Now, Arike doesn't usually have off nights. So very rarely will Satu have to be the number one option on any given night. But in the event that Arike's hurt or any event that the shots just aren't falling for her, Satu's proved this season, hey, like Ogunbowale is not the only person on this team that you have to be worried about. Like, you got to be worried about me too and what I can bring to the table from this position. She's been amazing. I 100% agree with you. The Sun, I've talked ad nauseum about the Sun so far throughout the course of the show about how they have a bunch of dogs. The one thing I will say is I was a little apprehensive about if that toughness would still exist, because I think a lot of that toughness came from just the style of coaching that Curtis Miller brought to the table. And we're seeing some of that toughness now in LA, but they just got dogs up and down the roster. But that's just who they are. You have Alyssa Thomas, who you talked about. I've mentioned Dejanay Carrington. They've got Natisha Hyman, who is incredible. And she kind of had her own little moment in the offseason, kind of speaking to some of those players that got cut, saying, like, look, I've been cut a bunch of times. And, like, here I am on a roster, a championship caliber roster, because they were just in the finals last season. And, like, this is what I'm doing. They've got Brown and Jones. This is a talented roster, and they have those dogs. I did underestimate the Connecticut Sun just a little bit because I was concerned about what it would look like, not just to lose your head coach, but then to also lose your best player. And so far through the first 6 games of the season for them, they've lost one of them. They've been playing good basketball, and it's hard to look away from it. And then you talk about the Chicago Sky, who, like you said, they're at 3-3. They haven't really done anything too crazy, but James Wade is still there. And we know who James Wade is, and we know what he brings to the table as well. And Kalia Copper, as you mentioned, has clearly proven that she can be the number one option. We saw that a bit in that championship run they had a couple seasons ago when she ended up winning Finals MVP, if I'm not mistaken. So now she's just fully invested, and she is fully in that role of being the person and that this offense flows through. And it's been incredible to see. I would expect nothing less than the Sky and the Sun to be in the thick of things and to be in the playoffs. And I'll be honest, I don't know if the Wings will be able to keep this up through the course of the season, but I think down the stretch of the season, they'll be in the hunt for that last spot in the playoffs in the West, because they've been playing good ball too. It's just been incredible. There's a bunch of talent in this league, and it's not shocking how they're performing because of who's on the roster. It's just surprising to see that when you look at the things that they've gone through last season, when you look at what happened in the offseason, for these 3 teams specifically, to be in the thick of things and firmly be in control of their own identity and put up the fights they've put up throughout the course of the season, it's been an incredible thing to watch. So really quickly, before we get out of here, today marks 2 weeks of the WNBA season, as I mentioned. Who has been the best player in the league so far for you? And just to make it easy, we'll do one in the East and one in the West. Who's been the 2 players that you've been looking at the most?
Breanna Stewart, I think in the East, I think it's her. I think it's been her. She had the 40-point game. She's early on. She's making her mark. I think it's about her. And then I'm going Jackie Young in the West. I just think on the best team, I think she's been the best player so far. And that could change because, like I said, Chelsea Gray could be their best player. Kelsey Plum could be it. Asia. But the best player, I'm giving it to Jackie Young on the West right now.
The beautiful thing about the early parts of the season is, like, we've seen so many great performances that there's no wrong answer really for this. For me in the East, I understand what Brianna Stewart has done, and we've talked about her, but I got to give it to Elena Delle Donne. Like, what she's done so far. I know the miss to 2-2, but she's been incredible. And she has been, again, playing with that chip on her shoulder. Like she mentioned, as you talked about, like, she's not a rookie. Like, she deserves to get more foul calls than what she's been getting. And we've talked about how much the Mystics as a whole, but especially Elena Delle Donne, has been playing with a chip on her shoulder about trying to prove, like, look, we know what the Liberty have going on up there, but we're here too, and we exist, and we have that pedigree. And then the West, I got to give it to Satu. Like, I know that Jackie Young has been hooping. I know that Arike Ogunbowale has been hooping, but what she's been doing so far through the course of this season for Dallas, like, just reminding everybody, like, I know I've been dealing with some injuries. I know I've been in and out of the lineup. I know I've had a couple things going on with me, but when I'm here, I'm here. And she's been here so far for the Dallas Wings, and they have loved the fact that she has been there. Really quickly, before you plug, who are 1 or 2 teams that you are on the lookout for as we head into the next 2 or 3 weeks of the season?
I'm definitely trying to keep an eye on Atlanta because I'm a big Ryan Howard fan. I'm really big on Ryan Howard. I think and they still have to fill out their roster and their makeup and identity. But I think over the next couple seasons she will become one of those individual forces that it'll be just her enough. She's going to start to really give people issues really soon. I'm big on Ryan Howard, and as I've watched her a couple games, I'm seeing her just get more comfortable, feel herself out. I just see her as such an impact player that can lead her team, that can galvanize her team and make a really impressive run at some point. So I'm keeping my eye on Atlanta for sure.
There's two teams I'm keeping my eye on for two different reasons. The first one is the Storm. They've lost a bunch of pieces, but aside from the blowout when they lost their first game of the season, they lost by what I think was 41 points to the Aces. Their two other losses to the Wings and to the Liberty were both close losses. They lost to the Wings by 4, and they lost to the Storm by 8. Their next 4 games are against the same two teams. They play the Sparks tomorrow and on Tuesday. They play the Mystics next Friday and then on Sunday. So they're going to get a double dip at both of these teams. I think they've got one on the road in Los Angeles, and then the next 3 are at home. Jewel Lloyd, as always, has been playing great basketball. I think the Storm are going to get a couple. I think they'll get at least 2 of the next 4 just because of the familiarity there. When you've got to play 2 teams back-to-back like that and 3 of the games are at home, I think they have a good shot. The other team I want to look out for is the LA Sparks. They are 1-3 right now, or 1-2 right now. A lot of it has to do with the fact that some of their players have been in and out of the lineup due to injury. Neka was sick at one point in time. I think Chene has been dealing with some kind of injury or something like that. So they haven't been at full strength. But we talked about Zaya Cook. We've talked about Curtis Miller. This is a good basketball team. And I mentioned a couple weeks ago on the show that I expect the Sparks to be, when they're fully healthy and when they're rolling, a team to look out for, not just in the West, but in the WNBA, because the one thing that they were always missing really is a head coach that could come in there and take control and really instill some consistency offensively, defensively, and toughness. The Sparks this season mirror a lot of what Kurt Miller was working with in Connecticut. Dogs up and down the roster, a clear player at the helm that can lead the rack, and then a couple other players around the way that can make things happen. I think the Sparks are going to be a team to look out for. I think as they get healthier and as their players come back, they'll start to rattle off some more of those wins, and they'll start looking like potentially the Sparks of old. Not necessarily a championship contender, but a force to be reckoned with, and a team that at the very least, if you see them in the playoffs, it will not be an easy go at all. So I'm looking out for the Sparks. It is always a pleasure, Martin, to have you on the show. It is always a pleasure having you on the show. Please, as always, let everybody know where they can find you and all your content.
At Soaries on Twitter, at Martin.Soaries on Instagram, and check out Basketball Society on YouTube to see the podcast, other videos, and a lot more of me talking about this wonderful game.
Martin does a lot of things. He does a lot of things. He's a busy guy. He does game tape breakdowns. Talk about the W. He got you on that yoga. He got you on that breathing. That's a one-stop shop to all things basketball over there for Martin Stories. It's always a pleasure to work with Martin. It's always a pleasure to sit back on Instagram and open his story. There's 30 things. And usually you get on Instagram, you see a story that long, you just skip through it. You can't skip through Martin's story because there's always something on there that you can take from it and learn from it. As a fan of basketball, as a basketball player, whatever it is, it's always a pleasure. So definitely make sure you follow Martin on all platforms so you can get more of that. And then once you do that, make sure you come back here and subscribe to the Give Us a Shot Network. Both subscribe to the Give Us a Shot Network. There's so much amazing content on the show. Of course, you've got my show. You have JT and the Don. You've got Bert and Jerm with Stuff About Sports. You have Mike and Corey of The Divide. And then, of course, you have the High Spot podcast. So much amazing content throughout the week, from Sunday to Saturday and back again. It's so much amazing, fun content. Now, this was a WNBA show, but I would be remiss because we haven't talked about the finals at all. Just really quickly before we go, who is your pick to win the finals this year?
I did pick Denver to win, but I'm not one of these people saying that there's no way Miami can win. I'm trying to keep reminding people that they've got sickos over there. When you're dealing with sickos, you've got to put a sicko down. So I can barely call it until I see them die, but I do have Denver winning.
Can't get mad at that at all. Well, As I said the last time with Martin was on the show, and as I've referenced other times in other shows, other people, this is going to be a one-stop shop of all things WNBA basketball. Like the finals are going to be over in maybe the next week and a half, and after that, it's going to be straight WNBA. So if you don't like that, I don't know what to tell you. As Martin has said, and as I have said a couple of times, if you don't like women's basketball, you're just not a basketball fan. It's okay. You're an NBA fan, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just this won't be the show for you over the summer. See you in September for football, you Neanderthal. This won't be the show for you. So for my guy, Martin Soaries of the Basketball Society, this is Marcus of Go Talk on Marcus and the Give Us a Shot Network signing off. Thank you guys for watching. Go watch some women's basketball because it's good for the soul. Realign your chakras, do some breathing exercises. And as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.